Hey friends, I hope you're having a great start to your new year. Today I'm going to do a craft that has been popular for about the past year or two, and I always wanted to try it, and I knew I had the materials at home, so I figured let's do it and make a video at the same time. Now here are the things that we'll be using: seashells, pretty paper, white paint, gold paint, decoupage medium such as Mod Podge, and you'll also need some craft paintbrushes. The first thing you want to do is wash and dry the shells to make sure that they're clean and ready to paint. I have some pretty paper. Those are some napkins that I cut up, and then I have some tissue paper, and this is a piece of scrapbooking paper that I got from my last thrift haul, if you saw that video. So I have my paintbrushes and a pencil and a scissor as well. Now the first thing we're going to do is we're going to paint the insides of our shells white, and you can see the one shell I have doesn't need paint, but the other one has the dark color in the inside, and because some of the paper we're using is kind of translucent, we are going to cover up some of those dark areas with some white acrylic craft paint. Now, I know that some people like to paint the entire shell. You can use spray paint, but the top part outside of the shell is so pretty, and that's nature's artwork, and I'm not going to cover that up, but I am going to just put a coating of white paint in the underside of the shell, because that's where we're going to be applying our paper, and you don't want to be able to see through the paper. So one medium coat of paint on the underside of the shell should be sufficient. Make sure that you use the brush and get inside the crevices of the scalloped edge of the shell, and then set it aside to dry. You'll see in just a few moments that one of the papers that I'm going to decoupage inside the seashell is a thin tissue paper that's white with a light floral design. And if I didn't paint over some of those dark areas, it would definitely ruin the design. You'd see the shell through the paper, and we don't want that. So here I am just doing one after the other, and it's easy if you're going to do a bunch at a time and you kind of work in an assembly line kind of process. I bought these shells years ago, and I had them in a container in my workshop, and I was actually going to make a stained glass lamp out of them because, I used to make stained glass before I made jewelry years ago, so that tells you how long I've had these shells. And, I've seen the decoupaged ones popping up here and there, and it's always been in the back of my mind. I need to make some of these too. I want to try it out. I have the materials, so I figured why not? And like I said, the outside of the shell is so pretty that I definitely don't want to paint over that. Now, if you had a plain shell, then, maybe you'd want to paint over that. But for these, I'm just leaving the outside as is. So the next thing we're going to do is we are going to trace the shape of our shell on our paper. Now I'm going to do this sunflower first, and since it's kind of a big floral pattern and I'm using a small shell, I don't want to just have the yellow center of the flower. I want to make sure I get some of the green part and even some of the white background in the piece that I'm cutting out. So you'll be able to see more that it is a flower, if that makes sense. You'll be able to see in a moment what I mean once I have it cut out. So I'm going to just cut around where I did the pencil, and it doesn't have to be exact. When you put this in the shell and we decoupage it down, there's going to be a little space between where the paper ends and the edge of the shell, but we're going to take care of that a little bit later on with some gold paint, and I'll show you how I do that. Now here's the tissue paper piece, and I'm going to look for a part on the paper that has a nice floral design, and I'm going to center my shell on that. Again, I'm going to trace around it, and I'm going to cut it out. Now, the shells aren't perfectly symmetrical, so, when you cut out the paper, it might be a little bigger on one side than the other. You're just going to have to kind of hold it in the shell and then, just snip it a little bit more if you need to get it to fit. But like I always say, it doesn't have to be perfect. So here's the scrapbook paper. Now, this is a thick, more like towards a cardstock weight of paper. So I'm going to trace this one out, and I'm going to cut it out. And the shell that I'm using for this one is a little bit more flat. It doesn't have as deep of a curve, and I chose that shell for this paper because the paper is not as flexible as the thinner papers, but it will fit in very nicely and look just as nice as the others. So you can see as I paired them up. I set them aside so I don't get the papers mixed up with the different shells. And I'm going to use Mod Podge for my decoupage medium. I have both matte and glossy, and I chose to use glossy for this project. No particular reason, I just like them a little more shiny. So what we're going to do is we're going to center the paper over the shell, and for this one, I didn't even have to put decoupage medium because I picked up that shell and guess what? The paint was still a little tacky. So the paper started to stick right away. Now this is the one I did with the sunflower design napkin. And I'm just going to go around with my fingers and press down. And while I'm pressing it, the napkin is going in between all those ridges, and most of the little folds are coming out of the napkin. Make sure there's no bubbles under there. And then I'm going to just take my brush and put a nice even coat of decoupage medium over all of the paper up to and covering the edges. And then we're going to set that one aside to dry, and we'll move on to our next one. Now for the next one that I'm going to do, the paint at this point has dried, so I will need to put a coat of decoupage medium on the shell before I put the paper on. Now this kind of paper, you can put a coating on the reverse side and then, press that down to the shell, but the paper is so thin that I find it kind of difficult and awkward to get a coating of decoupage medium on the paper. Just put it in the shell and then put the right side up of the paper, and then we're going to do like we did with the last one. Line up the edges as best you can. I like to start with the edges and just really gently press it down, working toward the center. And you want to make sure that it's not really lopsided, like the paper's not really pushed, to one side or the other. And that's why we do the edges slowly first, and then just use your fingers to, continue to press the whole thing down. And once again, I'm going to put a nice even coat of decoupage medium over top of the paper, over all the edges, and then we're going to set that aside to dry as well. Now it's time to do our third shell that has the heavier paper. And if you find that the paper is wrinkling and too hard to fit into the shell because the paper is kind of heavy, you can take your scissors and just snip about a 1/4 inch into your paper at 1 or 2 points, and that will help the paper neatly kind of fold over itself a little bit into the shell. I found that because this paper was a little heavier, I had to spend a little more time on this one, going around and just making sure all the edges were really adhered well. And I did put decoupage medium on the back of the paper of this one as well. And once it's all in the ridges and all pressed down, again, give it a coat of decoupage medium. So now we've used 3 different types of paper. We did the sunflower design paper napkin, we did the pink and white tissue paper, and then we did the heavier cardstock paper with roses. And once they're dry and all the decoupage medium has dried, what we're going to do next is we're going to find a small craft paintbrush. I'm looking here for something around size 2, size 4, and these are just inexpensive craft brushes. If you like to make a lot of art projects and craft projects, you already know that you need to have a variety of inexpensive craft brushes. They're great to have. So I chose my brushes, and I'm going to use a gold metallic paint. You can use a metallic acrylic paint. The type of paint that I'm using is the kind that comes in those paint markers that you have to shake up, and it's the same with this paint. You want to shake it really well, and then I'm using a small craft paintbrush, and I'm going to start by going around those tooth edges so I can make sure I get in between all the little gaps. You can see in the light there how this paint has a really nice glimmer, and that's why I choose to use it. But like I said, acrylic paint works just as well. So I'm finishing putting gold on all the little areas of seashell that are sticking out past the edge of the paper. And what I'll do next is I'll take a little more paint, and I'm going to actually paint over the edge of the paper, make the gold line a little bit wider, and it gives it more of a polished look. And once I finish that, I will do the other side, the hinge end of the shell, and you can see I'm doing that right there. I love the look of the gold paint. I think it's very elegant, but what other colors of paint do you think would look good? How about something dark like a black paint or maybe silver? It really is just personal preference, whatever you like best, whatever your favorite color is, maybe what matches your decor. It really is just personal preference. And I'm going to make sure that this has a nice kind of a heavy coat, not super goopy and thick, but a generous coat of gold paint. And I'm going to check it all out, and then I'm going to set it aside to dry. And here's a time lapse of how I finished off the other ones. These were really fun to make. And after using the different types of paper, I think the tissue paper was my favorite. I think that it just presses so nicely into the shell, and it just forms with every curve of the inside of the shell. That makes them very quick and easy to do. One other thing to take note of is the size of the design on your paper. You can see with the larger sunflower design, it's a really nice look. It's different. I prefer the smaller floral design, and that's probably just because I'm not working with really big shells. I'm kind of working with medium small size shells, and you can get packs a little bit more punch when you can see more of a floral in there, I think. And once again, that's just another personal preference. It just depends on what you like. All in all, I'm so glad I made these. They were a lot of fun. The finished product is just beautiful. You can put them in little bowls around your house. You can give them as gifts. You can make them into decorations or ornaments. And if you have a bigger size shell, you could even use it as like a little ring dish or something for your earrings. And I definitely would try this if I were you. It's a lot of fun. And you know, if you're a beachcomber like I am, and you come home from your ocean vacations with a seashell or two every year, they can start to pile up, and you know, you want to do something with them. And this is a great option. Here's one more peek at our supply list. I hope you try it out at home. If you do, make sure you come back and leave a comment and let us know how it went for you. I have a really cool and fun art project coming up soon, so don't forget to check back. And if you like this video, give it a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe.